Thank you for your patience. I had a long journey to make, so I'll just starting upstairs in the last committee. The next one that sat in my seat was there immediately, and I said, "Oh, freshman legislator, overachiever. You know, want to be there a half an hour ahead of time rather than half hour behind." And the chairman's not good, I know. We have guests, so we thank the young leaders from agribusiness. Yes, so thank you for being here. I hope you don't leave underwhelmed, but you might. Not because of the presenters, but because of the makeup of the committee and the chairman. But
I resemble that remark.
at least you all are finally listening. Yes. I didn't point out, but if the shoe fits. All right. We have another, I think, good meeting today. I know some of our folks in the committee have heard this before, but it is important and something that we have done now for a number of years. And in the Ag and Natural Resources Committee, in the past, water has been part of it, but over the last few years, water has been a separate committee, which is a good thing to give plenty of time there. So with that, we do have bill introductions, and first up, we have Kelsey Olson from the Department of Agriculture.
Good afternoon, members of this committee. I am Kelsey Olson. I serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I would like to introduce Bill 24 RS 2683. This program would establish the voluntary poultry improvement program within the Kansas Department of Agriculture and would authorize the agency to also charge a fee in conjunction with that voluntary program.
Questions, Ms. Olson? Seeing none, the bill is introduced. Thank you. Do we have other bill introductions today? Seeing none, we will move on. Up today is the role of the Kansas Water Authority and the State Water Plan, and we welcome the Chair of the Kansas Water Authority, Don Buehler. Welcome back to committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Rajas and the committee. It's my pleasure to be here today to give you an update on the State Water Plan and provide you the annual report from the Kansas Water Authority. So do you all have a copy, right? Fantastic. This will be for part of my, my discussion today. First, on behalf of the Kansas Water Authority, it is my pleasure to present our 2024 annual report to the Governor and Legislature. This report is presented to you in keeping with the responsibilities of the Kansas Water Authority to advise the Governor and the Legislature on Kansas water policy matters and to share the priorities identified by the Kansas Water Authority relative to the expenditure of the State Water Plan Fund. First, I would like to say to members of the House, thank you for the passage of Senate Substitute for House Bill 2302 that provided funding to the State Water Plan. On behalf of the Kansas Water Authority and the Regional Advisory Committees, please accept our sincere gratitude. And today I have a few of those folks with me today, members of the Kansas Water Authority and the Regional Advisory Committees, and I'm going to ask that they stand and let them see who's here with us today. Thank you all. In keeping with the statutory duties of the Kansas Water Authority, we have composed policy recommendations for inclusion in this report, beginning on page 5. This year, we are highlighting funding, the Kansas Water Transfer Act, and regionalization. We encourage you to give these policy recommendations thoughtful consideration. A secure and adequate funding source remains the key to fully implementing the State Water Plan, and the Water Authority continues to urge the Governor and the Legislature fully fund the State Water Plan. So first, I'd like to go through the report with you. If you'll turn to page 1. On page 1, this is the Kansas Water Authority, the makeup of the authority, the members that are listed, where they're located. And so we have the voting members. There are 13 voting members that are either appointed by the governor or by legislative leadership. We also have 11 ex officio members, and these are the heads of our agencies and our water experts. So when we have water authority meetings, we look to our experts to guide us and provide information and making sure that we have all of the information that we need as we discuss these issues. So next, I'd like to take a look at the Water Authority budget recommendations. I'm going to go to page 8 of the annual report. These are the expenditure line items. And if you look at the very far right column, FY 2025 Water Authority recommendations, there are 4 agencies that have implement some part of the state water plan. And so these 4 agencies have their budgets here, and these are recommendations from the Water Authority and working with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Department of Agriculture, the Kansas Water Office, and the Department of Wildlife and Parks. Next, I'd like to review the revenue for the state water plan, so I'm going to turn to page 7. On page 7, we're going to look at transfer and adjustments. In the right-hand column is the FY 25 Water Authority and agency recommendations. So we see the State General Fund transfer at $6 million, the Economic Development Fund transfer at $2 million. There's $50,000 for multi-purpose small lakes. And then you'll see the dollars from last year from the House Bill 2302, $35 million. And then you'll see the 2 line items with a negative coming back out, the $5 million and the $12 million. Those are the 2 brand new grant programs. So those dollars come back out of the state water plan. So if you take 35 million minus the 5 minus the 12, you get a balance of 18 million that remains in the state water plan fund. Then the lower portion are all of the receipts, and those tend to fluctuate a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit every year. So it ends up that the total is 41 and change million dollars for the state water plan. And then I'm going to have you turn back to page 5. So I want to highlight one of our policy recommendations so that I want to make sure that I answer any questions you might have on what we meant here. So this is the funding piece of our recommendations. So in 2023, last year, our annual report, if you go back to that document, we put in there that we thought that the state water plan was going to need $69 million to fully implement it. So with the new funding from House Bill 2302 and the fees and the other dollars that are in that fund, we're at $39 million. So if you look at the graph on the far right, the royal blue color shows $39 million. The portion that's black, the $30.3 million, is how much we would still need to fully implement the state water plan, and that's an annual number. So we felt that in keeping with our obligation to advise the governor and the legislature on water policy issues and funding, that we would include this as well in our annual report. So I want to mention that today we've been here as on our Water Day. The Water Authority members and the Regional Advisory Committee members were all volunteers. We're either retired or have day jobs, and I'm really grateful that so many of them were able to come today to the State House and meet with many of you. So thank you for your time to meet with us today. We are so grateful for that. And I would like to thank the Kansas Legislature for recognizing the importance of and demonstrating a commitment to water funding. The State Water Plan funds programs across the entire state to meet the goals of the state. The Kansas Water Authority and the Regional Advisory Committees look forward to working with you during the 2024 legislative session and continuing to highlight the needs across the state for water funding that adequately supports the implementation of the Kansas Water Plan. So on behalf of the Kansas Water Authority and the Regional Advisory Committees, thank you for your dedication to finding solutions for our water needs across the state to meet the needs of all Kansans. Thank you, and I will stand for questions.
Questions for Ms. Mueller? Representative Shue. Oh, nope, Representative Minix. Never know.
We're not going to let her off that easy. Dawn, on page 8, you're talking new programs. Can you describe the new groundwater quality monitoring network?
I can. So that program is in partnership. It's Kansas Department of Health and Environment and the Kansas Geological Survey. This was a program that actually was in place for a long time and was cut. I don't know what year it was cut, but it's basically a groundwater quality monitoring network that will be in place across the state to monitor groundwater specifically. It's not for surface water, it's just for groundwater. And so this is very similar to like the, they do the groundwater monitoring for the quantity of the groundwater. This is for the quality of the groundwater.
Approximately how many samples are across the state are you looking at?
I don't know the answer to that. Do we know? Yeah, we'll have to ask Kansas Department of Health and Environment that question. I don't think anyone's here today, sir. We could get that answer for you, though.
Okay. Can you describe the water injection dredging that's illustrated on page 17?
Absolutely. The water injection dredging project is a pilot project. So I think all of you, it's no secret that our reservoirs are filling up with sediment. And they had a useful life that was estimated, I think, for like 50 years. And in some cases, some of these reservoirs are filling up really quickly. And we need them. We need them for flood control. We need them for public water supply. We need them for irrigation. They have lots of different uses. Not all of them have the same uses, but they're a highly important part of our infrastructure. Well, these reservoirs that are filling up with sediment, we need to come up with a way to try to deal with the sediment. And using like dredging techniques where you just simply, I'm going to use a small term, but you use a backhoe and you take it all out. That's really we found to be cost prohibitive. It's incredibly expensive to take all the sediment out of the reservoir. So this project is a partnership between a lot of different agencies, but one of the main partners is the Corps of Engineers. And this has never been done anywhere in the world. But they want to pilot test bypassing the sediment. So as the sediment, it comes into the reservoir, it tends to settle out. So in the area around the dam, they have this water injection technique where they send water down to suspend the sediment, and then at high outflows, they will send that sediment downstream and try to get some of the sediment out of the reservoir. So basically what they're trying to do is to mimic the natural system, which would have sediment coming in and sediment coming out of a stream, and it's not stuck behind a dam wall. And so they're going to try this pilot project to see if this has success. Now, it only works on certain types of reservoirs, so it won't work for all of our reservoirs, but it could work potentially for some of them if this pilot project is successful. They wanted to start this project earlier than now, but we've been in a drought and we need high reservoir releases of water in order to do the pilot test. So I think they're hopeful that, I think it's late 2024 or early 2025 that they'll be able to pilot test this. This will be the Kansas Water Office and the Corps of Engineers, but many of the other agencies are also involved, like Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks and Kansas Department of Health and Environment. That answer your question, sir?
Tuttle Creek is the first target?
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have said that. Yes, Tuttle Creek Reservoir near Manhattan is the first, that's where the pilot project will be done. And then if that's successful, then we'll see what next steps are, but we need for that to be successful first.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank
Oh,
you,
I'm
Mr.
sorry. I'm sorry. Representative Carlin, I'm sorry. She was going to do a quick follow-up. Yes, go
Really,
ahead.
that's okay, because I think my question was answered, because my concern was, it was supposed to be starting this fall, and I was concerned about why it hasn't gone forward, and you just told me because of the drought. Can you tell me what the water level is at the lake? I heard the other day it was how low, and I can't remember, maybe Sean, I don't know. somebody
I'm not
knows.
100% how many feet low it is,
And it's.
but we could find out.
It's low, really low, and so I understand now. And you really did a very nice explanation of it. I've heard it explained for years, because we've been working on it for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank
Now,
you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you,
Apologize.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for that presentation. It was very helpful, and for this report. I have two questions. One is, what is the projected impact on water supply downstream when we do this injection and move sediment out of the reservoir into the river? And, even water supplies downstream in Kansas and on when you get to the Mississippi River and into the Gulf of Mexico. How do we anticipate any problem from those people, and/or how will we manage that?
It's my understanding that the Corps of Engineers believes that the sediment will be released at such a high rate during high water conditions that they don't anticipate that it will be a huge consequence to those water intakes. However, that's why it's a pilot project, because they're not 100% sure. So there's going to be a lot of downstream monitoring of those water quality conditions. They're going to be monitoring the river for the sediment levels and for all types of water quality parameters to make sure that this is not going to harm the downstream water intakes and the water users. So we need this pilot project in order to answer a lot of those questions, but I think preliminarily they think that it won't be a huge issue, but I think we're going to find out.
Okay, and thank you for that answer. And could I ask one more question? And I thank you for this report that was very thorough but concise and well organized, so that I could gain a lot of information out of that. On page 5, and you touched on this in your report, there's still a $30 million shortage in fully funding the Kansas Water Plan. Could you tell me where that is, what services and what projects that $30 million would go to fund, and what are the consequences of not funding those things in the foreseeable future?
So I don't think I can answer that fully today, but we'd be more than happy to send you a follow-up set of information. The $69 million that we identified, there was a list of the projects and programs that those dollars would go towards in our 2023 annual report. And in hindsight, we probably should have included it in the 2024, because you're not the first person to ask that question. But we can certainly send you that list of projects, and then the water office would have to determine what of those projects haven't been funded yet. But I believe they could get you that information. Chairman, would you like for Director Owen to answer a little bit?
Fine.
Would that be
Yes,
great?
thank you.
Okay.
State your name for the record, please.
Thank you. Connie Owen, the director of the Kansas Water Office. And to fill out a little more of Dawn's answer, the 69 million number that was identified by the agencies is what would it take to fund everything in the Kansas Water Plan. The agencies were given a very short period of time to provide an answer to that question. So these are very broad estimates that were put together, and as Dawn said, in the annual report from a year ago, it identifies the areas and types of projects that would fund. So with the amount of funding that was provided this year, and thank you very much for the additional funding, the projects were not we didn't look at that list and say we're going to pay for that and that and that, but not that and not that. We looked at, for FY24, what could be paid for now, quickly. How can we get some money out the door this first fiscal year of the 5 years for HB 2302? So it wasn't a matter of picking and choosing from that list. So there isn't a specific list that exists of what didn't get paid for, but there is definitely a need, and the needs are identified and they're clear, and what the additional money would be paying for would be initiatives to help with Ogallala depletion, initiatives to help with water quality impairment, initiatives to help with the reservoirs, and for education and outreach throughout the state. And so we do have programs that we are doing, and we're considering new programs with the additional money to make those more robust. So there will be ongoing conversations ahead of this next year for the remainder of those 5 years of additional funding. So for example, in FY25, the Water Authority recommendations that Dawn identified that are on page 8, that far right column, that includes the additional 18 million for FY25. It still doesn't get us, as to try to get back to your question, what would an additional $30 million pay for? Those specific that specific answer has not yet been identified. That's what we hope to be able to identify given the additional funding. I hope that kind of helps answer your question.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other questions? Representative Minix?
Just for everybody's benefit here on the committee, last year, the House Water Committee passed out 2302 with a recommendation of $60 million per year over 5 years. And that included a $5 million for a technical assistance fund for small municipals here in the state of Kansas. And it was basically targeted as a loan program to cities of 1,000 or less, including rural water districts and some special water districts, with the intent that some of that could be forgiven to study and update their water systems. There was a $12 million dedication toward a construction fund, and that could be utilized as match for some federal money coming into the state of Kansas. The federal bill programs and infrastructure bills back there have a great deal of money that Kansas could utilize if we have the match money for it. We passed that bill out of the House chamber 119-3 at a $60 million figure. During conference committee, that was trimmed down somewhat. Most recently here, we challenged the water office to make quick and efficient use of those funds as much as possible. They designed the loan grant application system. I think they borrowed some from Colorado and possibly Department of Commerce to bring an expert into their office. They've never had a grant program before in the Kansas Water Office. But during that process, and with a application time period roughly just before Thanksgiving through Christmas, over a 6-week time period, for $17 million in state funds, they had requests for $380 million. And we are seeing those types of things as the demand for some of the services that the state of Kansas might hopefully provide to our small communities. There's lots of other things we'd like to enlarge. The Water Committee over the last 3 years of study identified water tech farms, cost share programs to incentivize producers. Out west of the Ogallala, 90% of the water utilized is in agriculture. If they can trim 20% off of their usage and maintain their productivity and keep our feed yards and our packing plants and our population and our economy, it's a huge amount. I'm told that the animal agriculture out west over the Ogallala is 2.5 times the aircraft industry in total revenue in the state of Kansas on a given year. That's a huge part of our economy. So I anticipate potentially going back to the Water Committee and asking for some additional funds this year. I've told a lot of people I probably wouldn't. I didn't intend to until we saw a little bit more of the results of what we've done so far. But in my opinion, $17 million fund that has $380 million in requests for drinking water or wastewater systems in our small municipals around the state of Kansas deserves a good discussion. So I'm sorry, Dawn, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted everybody here to be aware of that.
I think that was important. Thank you.
Thank you. If some of the young leaders want to grab the offering plates, we'll pass it around. All right, thank you. You're not done yet. I haven't even got
Okay.
started. So any other questions? I think first off, I want to go back and maybe do us a little educating. And Ms. Owens, if you want to come up, a clear definition of the difference between the water office and the water authority, because I think sometimes that does get blurred. So if both of you want to answer that question, or, because where's the policy arm? Who makes those decisions? Are you on equal footing? I think just it might help us to know exactly, there's so many different things, and you two kind of are at the top. And so define, I guess, as you both see the roles you play in Kansas Water.
Great, thank you actually for that opportunity, because it's commonly misunderstood, so I appreciate that. I'll turn your attention to page 1 of your annual report. And before I refer to that, the water office is my office is one of 3 primary water agencies for the state of Kansas. The others are KDHE, which regulates water quality. The other is the Division of Water Resources within the Department of Agriculture that regulates water quantity. They're the water rights people. They, as I said, they both regulate, they permit, they enforce. The third agency is the water office. We don't permit, we don't enforce, we don't regulate. We are the policy, planning, and coordinating office for the state of Kansas. Our flagship responsibility is the development of the Kansas Water Plan in cooperation with a lot of grassroots input and state and agency input and public comment. And where the water authority comes in is the water authority is a part of the water office. They are an advisory board that's created by statute, and that's what is on page 1 of your annual report. So this advisory board, you see the map and the various names. Those are the voting members of the water authority, and all but 2 are appointees of the governor. There's an appointee of the president of the Senate and an appointee of the Speaker of the House. If you can read the tiny little print, they mostly represent different interests: large municipal, small municipal, watershed districts, groundwater management districts, public at large, and so on. What's listed below under ex officio members of the Water Authority are the heads of the agencies and educational institutions and research organizations for the state of Kansas. That's the Brain Trust. Those are the content experts. The Water Authority in making their deliberations and their recommendations relies on the information and expertise of the state agencies and educational institutions. It's a total of 24 members that are on the Water Authority. The Water Authority, this advisory board, is created by statute to provide recommendations to the legislature and to the governor and to the director of the water office on policy considerations, what goes into the state water plan, and primarily and expenditures of the state water plan fund. So this is their job, and they are required by law to come up with this annual report that reports on how state water plan funds were spent in the past year, what the programs are that we have, and what their recommendations are for the coming fiscal year. As you will see on page, let me get it right, where's our budget page? Page 8. Dawn referred to this, but I'll just mention it again for clarification. This is a depiction of the recommendations for FY25 expenditure of the State Water Plan Fund. This fund is dedicated to paying for the things that are recommended in the Kansas Water Plan. The agencies, the separate different boxes that you see here, there are different agencies whose job it is to implement different things. So if there are water quality programs that are part of the water plan and for which there is money recommended, then those fall under the Department of Health and Environment. And likewise with the Department of Agriculture and the Kansas Water Office. So I mention this because in our budget presentations, as you're probably aware from year after year, when each of us agencies present our budgets, we present our portion of the State Water Plan Fund. And we may be, if leadership is wanting to do this, we may be moving toward presenting the State Water Plan Fund as a discrete fund. But at any rate, these recommendations from the Water Authority become part of our agency requests. So what the Water Authority recommends for these specified water office programs is what we recommend. We don't have the discretion to switch that up. You do, but we don't. And these have now been through the governor's process, and these are now accepted as governor's budget recommendations as well at this point. We'll be presenting about the budget more another day, but I wanted to help kind of flesh out those relationships, and it's not too complex, but it is a little bit, there are multiple players when you talk about the State Water Plan Fund. But Mr. Chair, I hope that was helpful.
Very good. Dawn, anything you want to add from a Water Authority standpoint?
Well, I think the only piece that I would add that I think is really important is to understand that we're all volunteers, and also the regional advisory committees, there's 14 of them across the state. They all send information to the Water Authority, and they are literally the boots on the ground. They're the folks that live in your communities. They're the folks that are at your ball games and at the coffee shop, and they're what I consider the local experts on water. And so they're part of this process too. And so all of us, we're just trying to help, and we're part of the volunteer arm of providing input on water issues as we see it in our communities.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Talk about the Ogallala. The discussions you have at Water Authority meetings, are they, what's, you know, we can see numbers, we can see some of the things, and the data looks, you know, relatively good, I think. Seems they're making progress. I mean, talk about how the Ogallala is discussed at the Water Authority meetings. I know it's a big thing inside this building and all over the state. Everybody, I think if you mention the word water, it may be quality. The next thing is the Ogallala. So can you address that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'll just kind of give you some overview of how the Water Authority has talked about the Ogallala. If you go to, just so that we know, on page 11 of the report is the section on Ogallala Aquifer Initiatives. So you can see here the different programs that we've identified with the agencies that can help us solve some of the issues and also help to give landowners some tools. The biggest thing that I hear that we talk about at the Kansas Water Authority meeting is how to help people. How do you help folks get the programs and the projects that they need to make decisions about the things that they do? And we know that there's some great work that's happening with all of the groundwater management districts across the state. The Water Authority fully supports the work that they are doing and wants to be helpful. So how can we provide programs that folks in that part of the state can use to try to solve some of their problems and help slow down the decline of the aquifer, and still be economically viable, still have communities, strong communities, still have a strong water supply for the people that live there? How can we make sure that we do all of those things and provide the tools while still taking care of the people that live there? And honestly, we don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone does. But we're interested in continuing to have conversations about it. We have an Ogallala Aquifer, an Ogallala committee. It hasn't met very often, but we just created it. And, you know, we're talking about some of these programs and what are the ways that we can help folks.
Thank you. Representative Roth?
Have you, I don't know how to ask the question, but there's a problem in Caney, Kansas, a big water problem in Caney, Kansas. And we do talk about the Ogallala because of the impact of that with farming and ranching and stuff like that. But can you tell me what's going on there in that Caney? And I was looking at your map on whatever page it was. Is it the Verdigris or is it the Timber Creek, Grouse Creek area? Which on page 23, there's a map, and I guess those are, it's got RAPS project areas, but I think there needs to be a project down around Caney because they had to bring in porta pots and they don't have water, they don't have nothing there.
Yeah, probably I'm not the expert on this topic, but I'd be happy to have Director Owen give some additional information. What I do know is that they've had some significant challenges. We've also had a significant drought in that part of the state. It's been really devastating for communities to deal with this drought. It's been, to watch the drought monitor move constantly is amazing to me, but Southeast Kansas has really had to deal with the drought. And it's my understanding that they're getting some help from the city of Coffeyville, which is some much needed news. But would you like any further information that I could ask the water office? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. I forget we have an expert also in the room.
Yes, I'm just going to chime in a little bit, and Representative Blex, I'll refer to you, but the city of Caney, I think maybe you announced this the other day, sir, that they'd reached an agreement with Coffeyville to provide to provide a water supply. So perhaps I should refer to you to further explain that.
Well, thank you for that. It has been trying, and we're normally 42 inches of rainfall, and we've had 2 years of really extreme drought. The Caney gets its city water supply from the branch of the Caney River, and it's supplied by a relatively small watershed lake, Timber Hill Lake, and it has a long path to get to the dam that in the late 80s, they raised the dam to increase the water storage behind the dam. And there's a long list of problems. Some of them are self-induced, many of them, but the bottom line of it is it's a small drainage that comes up very fast and floods real easy, but does not have much storage capacity, and they don't have really a backup plan, which I'm on the water committee too, and I've also supported a regional water supply concept, which is basically kind of what they do. And they went through a process of you know, shutting down car washes, having water restrictions, voluntary at first, really impacted businesses, got to the point where they shut the schools, or put the schools on a 4-day school day and had porta potties outside. The mayor tried to shut down the public restrooms in a convenience store and a few of the restaurants, and that lasted about a day. But basically, and they have a real poor water treatment system. They have a membrane system that tends to plug up with, when they suck in water, gets a lot of silt on it, and then they have to actually use treated water to backflush, which counts as a leak in a way. And then plus they had a lot of leaks that the city did not take care of, some of these problems. So it's kind of a long-standing problem. It just didn't come into play just here until the last 2 years, just made it really significant with the drought. So they explored different alternatives to getting water out of Copan, which is an Oklahoma lake, which would bring water from Dewey, a small town between Barboursville and Caney, to get water. And they looked at that. The city commission didn't want to make a decision. Not a lot of money. There's 1,900 souls live in that town. So, and their minimum water bill is about $120 a month, which is really pretty high for somebody on fixed income. So it has a significant economic impact. And I have worked with the city. It's right. It's my only city in Montgomery County where I'm the sole representative. I live about 10 miles from it. I'm very familiar with the process, been involved with it for 20, 30 years. Actually, Dawn had mentioned the Basin Advisory, Regional Advisory Committee, the grassroots. And grassroots, they go to ball games, they shop in your store, and once in a rare while, they'll actually sit in this seat right here. Because I am a member of the Verdigris, been that way for, I don't know, close to 20 years. And it has provided me with a lot of knowledge as a legislator to be able to relay to Caney and help them through the system of what's available. So I appreciate that work experience. But now they've got into contract with the city of Coffeyville to agree to provide water, which is out of the Verdigris River system. And of course, we also have a lot of demand in Montgomery County. We're having one of the largest soybean crushing plants in the nation come in, and they laid a 14-inch pipe, which if you imagine a 14-inch pipe, black plastic pipe, that's big. I thought at first when they was going to do a crossing there on a culvert, but and that's from the Independence Water Treatment Plant, which is also on the Verdigris system. So Elk City, I worked for Wildlife and Parks, managed Elk City for 15, 20 years, and Elk City has a high surface drainage. It comes up fast, but it's also suffering like most of our eastern Kansas reservoirs with about 35, 36% mud sediment. So we've lost storage capacity. So we do have a water crisis, and certainly Caney has been the poster child. I went to visit my son and daughter in Louisville, Kentucky, and they both went to Caney School. And they said, "Hey, Dad, I see where Caney made the Louisville paper." So they were, AP put them out, and, which is not necessarily the good news. But what it has done, it has brought the awareness and the importance of water. It certainly supported our Chairman Minnick's support of the water bill last year, and we got a lot of public support on that. So I think the water, finally we got enough rain to put water trickling over the dam, so all the water restrictions are now off that they did have on. But it was a tremendous economic impact to the area. But I think it just emphasizes the importance of having a regional water supply system in that there. So I apologize for all that. It probably more than you wanted to know, but thank you.
Road trip to Caney, get a glass of water, but a small glass. Yes, all right. Other questions? I have a couple other things. Representative Schlingensieben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, both of you. I just have a quick question. So would Caney, for example, be like a prime example of a community that could apply for some of these grants that we were talking about earlier in terms of, okay, so that is an example of, okay.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
As Representative Side, we've been dealing with Pretty Prairie too for several years. Where is that in, where they are now? Is that still trying to be resolved?
They just put up a new water tower and a new water treatment plant, and it's put in a lot to do with, a lot of it was caused from overuse of nitrogen fertilizers. They had high nitrate levels. So the city had provided water, bottled water to everybody that had kids. But like I said, through all the process, they got a new water tower, they got a treatment plant. They put in several big ponds for the waste treatment to put water back in, and it's pretty good. It's kind of a poster child again for what they've been doing, so.
Okay.
And that started clear back before 2012, clear back even in that area, the water, it was a big concern about that.
Sure. Okay. Yes, Representative Blex.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, I apologize for that second time. It cost the school district in Caney I talked to the superintendent, $20,000 to bring in all those porta potties, the bottled water, and all the water restrictions there. So you look at the economic benefit of water, there's $20,000 in that short little time frame of what it costs the school district. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I don't belabor the fact, but water is a big issue for all of us, regardless of where we are on this. And as I look at this report and, dealing with water for several years, I just did a quick count. My math may not be right, but I'm seeing like 26, 28 initiatives dealing with water. Different programs, different things. And just glancing at, it seems like, there's maybe 4 or 5 different ones and subs after that. Is part of the challenge, do we have too many programs? Do we have too many, they're not exactly the same, but they're a lot of the same. Then it would bring program managers and so on. And I don't necessarily have an opinion. I'm just in glancing at this and trying to grasp just in this alone 28 different programs and or initiatives. Can we sometimes get lost with trying hard to do the right thing that we just continue to create programs?
I would say the Water Authority has had a lot of those conversations, those same conversations, trying to make sure that we're not duplicative and that these programs, meet the needs. But they are by agency. And so each one of the agencies has different responsibilities. So some of these programs may look duplicative, but in a lot of cases they're not because they're doing different things within them. But I will tell you that the Water Authority is continuing to have discussions about these things and trying to make sure that we're not being duplicative.
Mm-hmm. Representative Schlingensieben.
So just a quick question, because we're in Topeka and because we just had a boil alert due to, I understand, a combination of the low levels of water in the Kansas River and some malfunction and so forth. Is it just my impression? I spend a lot of time down by the river, and is it my impression that the Kansas River is historically low? I mean, I don't remember as a kid being able to walk from the boat ramp area clear out to the island and almost half the distance down to the Westgate Bridge. Is this kind of a part of the general drought conditions we're experiencing, and what is that going to mean for cities like Topeka that get their water out of that particular, you are the river keeper, right, of the Kansas River, right?
That's my other hat.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, can you say anything about historical development and what you're seeing?
Well, we haven't seen the Kansas River this low in a really long time. I'd have to go back and look at the data from the United States Geological Survey to be able to tell you whether or not it's the lowest ever. It's the lowest that I've seen it on the upper end around Junction City in a very long time. Yeah, you could practically walk across it. But drought is a huge concern, and we've been in a pretty good drought here lately. One of the things that we talked about at our last Water Authority meeting was long-term, long-range planning for drought. There's a huge concern by the Water Authority to continue the discussion about what are we going to do about long-term drought. And this takes us back to sedimentation in our federal reservoirs, water quality issues. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are associated with the long-term drought. So the Water Authority as a body, I'm always try to be careful that I speak one board, one voice. They have not made any further recommendations concerning drought and a path forward, but I do expect that we will have those conversations here in 2024. So I do think there'll be some more discussion on that. I just don't have anything more for you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Representative Seibert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, since you bring up the Kansas River here being slow. You know, I grew up on the Nenaskaw, which is on Cheney Lake, grew up in the bottom of Cheney Lake, actually, and it was 3 foot deep when I was a kid, and you couldn't walk across it when we'd get to cows, and they could take boats up it. And now a grasshopper can walk across it without boots. But when I was doing some research on that, there's like 1,200 and some circles, irrigation circles in Reno County, and there's 800 in Harvey County and 800 in Sedgwick County that surround that river, and you look at what they pump. What's the effect of all those 2,500 irrigation wells pumping 900 gallons a minute when it comes to that stream flow instead of the drought? Because I remember growing up in the 50s, we had 2 years we didn't have any rain, hardly drought, and it didn't affect the Nenaskaw River one bit at all. Does those 2,500 wells within 30 miles of that river have any effect on why it's down?
Well, sure it does. I mean, all water use has an effect on the level of the river combined with drought conditions. So, yeah, absolutely.
But when you said that you didn't mention that in your talk, you mentioned the drought. But what are we doing to try to monitor and manage that water so we don't run out of water? Because that's what feeds Cheney Lake, which is the Wichita water supply. And like the chairman asked on the Pretty Prairie, you know, the whole town of Pretty Prairie is surrounded by irrigation wells. And that was clear back to when they determined it was overuse of irrigation and nitrogen fertilizer. It wasn't because of the drought. What is the Department of Water doing to try to conserve the water and bring it down to a usable level so everybody has water?
Well, I have good news for you. That's the whole reason behind the state water plan, is to help our community members and landowners have conservation practices that they can install on their own farm or in their own community to conserve water. So that's what these programs are for. And there are programs like irrigation technology and getting sensors that they can put into the soil to see how much water they're using. I had one farmer from Northwest Kansas. I'll never forget, because when he told me this, it was kind of an aha moment and kind of funny, but actually he was from Southwest Kansas. He was talking about the soil moisture probes, and that you put them down in the soil and you can monitor how much water you're using or how much moisture is in your field, so that you know when to turn on the irrigation and when to turn it off. And he said, you know, I've been able to get a 20% reduction in my water use just by monitoring it. And then he says, look, I have it on my cell phone. It's not rocket science. And I was so amazed. I didn't even know the technology had come that far, that we can monitor all of these things. They don't even have to be there. So there are lots of opportunities and programs for folks to be able to help them.
And that's a good point, because, you know, we're very conservative conservation farmers too around there. But we have a law called use it or lose it. And if you don't use it, if you're an irrigator, you're going to lose your permit. So why aren't we doing something to change that law so we can, those 80% of the farmers who do an excellent job at irrigation, put in those, you know, do everything for crop rotation. But then you see somebody out there with the irrigation system running when it's raining. And that makes a lot of people in my district pretty upset, because they had to re-drill their wells, and yet they're just dumping water on it because the use it or lose it law. Are we doing anything to change that? Because I remember the previous governor tried that, and everybody got pretty mad at him in 2012.
You know, I don't really have any updates on that from the Water Authority. They haven't discussed it, not recently anyway. And I think further questions about that I would say to be directed to the Chief Engineer, Earl Lewis. He would better be able to answer those questions for you than I would.
All right, very good. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to comment on that. I don't believe that we have the use it or lose it anymore. I don't think that's something that's still in existence.
I think we go, yeah, Representative Minix.
There used to be a program called the Water Reserve Conservation Program. If you did not pump for several years, you needed to be enrolled in that program to maintain your water right, to keep your ownership of it. It's probably been 8 or 10 years ago. They did away with that within the Kansas water law. You still need to do a water pumping report every year, but you can report 0 and still maintain your right. They did away with the forfeiture of the water right if you didn't pump your wells. I'm nearing my quota of words for the day, but I do need to tell you that Heather O'Hara did a great research project here about a year ago, and it's out there on our S drive. And for members of the committee, you can view that as to what other states in our area invest in water on an annual basis. This morning in Water Committee, Katie Durham with GMD1 reported that the WCA water conservation area in Wichita County over the last 5 years, they're just rolling that into the second 5-year program. I believe the savings so far is 39.5% of the water pumped, and we've had some extremely dry years here lately. That is the type of results that we think people can see. The WCA is a totally voluntary program for irrigators in an area to get together and voluntarily agree to reduce their pumping. They still maintained the vast majority of their production. They saw their net profits actually increase slightly because of inputs. They are so happy with it, they are renewing for another 5 years. I think they're going to have a discussion about rolling that into another Lima or something. And there's a chance that they could get a little bit more aggressive on what their targets were. But over 5 years, 39.5%. And a lot of that is due to some of the tools and the resources that the Water Office has been able to, and the Division of Water Resources, and the technical support that they've received on that. That's an amazing return, in my opinion. Thank you.
Let's call for questions. Seeing none, thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Owens, for giving some answers as well. Okay. Also, you should have received the GMD3 report. I think as we get them, we will send them to you or put them up on the drive if you want to review those as not part of what we passed last year. Yes, we are meeting tomorrow. I know it's almost a full week. So here's what's going to happen. We'll have an update on the federal and state programs to plug abandoned oil and gas wells in Kansas, and also an update on House Bill 2168 dealing with industrial hemp. And then what we will do is we've invited a couple of producers in Kansas that have been before our committee before to kind of give us an update on how things have been going the last year. And then the bill that we heard last year in committee, we will review that right quick, and then we will go into working the bill. And then so you're aware, and so we will be voting tomorrow on that, right? No, are we meeting Thursday? This is terrible as a chairman. Call the chair. So yeah, we're going to do emergency final action probably, and it's still early. It's just the third week of the session, but so we're planning on voting tomorrow at the conclusion of discussing and working House Bill 2168. So that is the agenda for tomorrow. Anything else for the good of the cause?
Committee report.
The-
What did you say?
It,
You're going to put it.
I guess it's not there yet. We just received it. So,
Where do you, you're just going to email it out?
yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Yes. Right, and if you go to the Ag Committee's page on the Kansas Legislature, you can go back on that bill and find all the testimony from last year. So this is a full-blown hearing. What it is just a brief update. We wanted to kind of offer that and then go back and explain the bill. So if you have any questions before that, we'll do that. Saying nothing else, we will be back tomorrow at 3:30. We're adjourned.